I was standing behind my husband's chair, about to ask if he wanted more coffee, when his phone lit up on the armrest beside him. I wasn't trying to read it, I wasn't suspicious, not consciously, not yet. But the screen was right there, and the words were large, and my eyes moved the way eyes do. Your wife is holding you back. She's had her turn. Time to build something new. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. My breath went somewhere, I couldn't find it. And then I watched his thumbs move. I watched him smile as he typed back. You're not wrong. I've been thinking the same thing for a while now. He was sitting in the chair I'd picked out for him. In the house we'd bought together. In the life I had built around him like scaffolding around a building that turned out not to be worth saving. And he had no idea I was standing right there. I set the coffee mug down on the kitchen counter without making a sound. My name is Diana Reeves. I was 57 years old. We had been married for 31 years. And I had just read my own dismissal over my husband's shoulder while he sat there comfortable and careless, already moving on. I want to tell you something before I go any further. I have told this story exactly twice, once to my attorney and once to my daughter, until now. Because for a long time I thought the telling of it would undo me. I was wrong. The telling of it is the only thing that makes it mean something. So stay with me, because what happened next, what I chose to do instead of crying, instead of screaming, instead of collapsing on the kitchen floor, changed everything. And I think you need to hear it. But first, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. I've heard from women across this country who have been exactly where I was that October evening in Houston, Texas, standing in a kitchen that smelled like dark roast coffee and 31 years of marriage, holding very still. Tell me you're out there. I promise it helps. Let me take you back. Not all the way, just far enough for you to understand what was at stake. Marcus and I met in 1993. I was 26, finishing a master's degree in finance at Rice University, ambitious in the way you can only be when you're young enough to think ambition alone is sufficient. He was 30, already 3 years into a career at a downtown Houston investment firm, broad-shouldered and confident in the way that reads as stability when you're 26 and later reads as something else entirely. We married in 1994 at a church in the Heights neighborhood, 140 guests, a dress I still have in a box somewhere. We were going to be extraordinary together. I believed that. I believed it the way you believe things when the evidence is still all ahead of you. When our daughter Simone was born in 1997, I took what I told myself was a temporary leave. When our son Calvin came along in 2000, temporary became indefinite, and indefinite became permanent without anyone ever deciding it out loud. Marcus's career accelerated. Mine was put in a drawer. I told myself I was investing in the family. I told myself that was the same as investing in myself. I was wrong on both counts, but I didn't understand that yet. By 2024, Simone was 27 and working in pharmaceutical research in Austin. Calvin was 24 and finishing a graduate engineering program in Colorado. Marcus was a senior partner at Meridian Capital Group, one of downtown Houston's most respected mid-size investment firms. He had a corner office. He had a reputation. He had a secretary named Brianna Voss. Brianna was 27 years old. She had joined Meridian 2 years earlier, and I had met her exactly 4 times at the firm's holiday parties, where she always materialized near Marcus with drinks she'd fetched and questions she'd asked, and a smile that sat just slightly too long on her face. She was not unintelligent. That was the part people kept missing. She was, in fact, quite calculating. The 3rd time I met her, she said to me, in the presence of 3 other people. It must be so freeing, not having to think about a career anymore. She said it warmly. She said it like a compliment. I smiled and said something gracious and thought about it for 6 days afterward. Marcus said she was just young. He said I was reading into things. He patted my hand and changed the subject, and I let him, because I had spent 31 years becoming very good at letting him. That October night after I read those words on his phone, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I did not do the thing every nerve in my body was screaming at me to do. Instead, I waited. I lay beside Marcus that night and listened to him breathe steady, deep, entirely untroubled, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Shift. Like a tectonic plate adjusting to a new reality. The grief was there. Of course it was there. 31 years of mornings and holidays and children and fights and reconciliations and quiet Sunday afternoons, all of it now. rearranging itself into something I didn't have a word for yet. But underneath the grief was something colder and cleaner and far more useful. Clarity. At 2:45 in the morning, I got up quietly and went to Marcus's home office. His laptop was password protected. I knew the password. It was Simone's birthday. He'd set it years ago and never changed it. Because why would he? I was just his wife. I was just the furniture. I want to be honest with you right now. Sitting here telling you this. My hands were shaking when I opened that laptop. Not from fear. From something more like grief hitting its second wave. The one that comes when you stop being shocked and start being sure. I spent the next hour and 40 minutes going through everything I could find. Bank statements, credit card accounts, investment summaries, calendar entries, and then the emails. Hundreds of them, going back almost a year, between Marcus and Brianna. You deserve someone who actually sees you. I see you. And his response is patient, practiced, the voice of a man who had thought this through. I'm getting everything in order. I just need a little more time. Once this is done, we can finally live the way we're supposed to. Once this was done, I was this. I forwarded every document, every email thread, every statement to a private account I created right there, an account Marcus didn't know existed, on a server he'd never heard me mention. Then I found the document that stopped me cold. A signed consultation agreement with a divorce attorney, dated 11 days earlier. Marcus had already begun planning how to leave me, and more importantly, how to minimize what I would receive when he did. He had a head start. He had resources I didn't know about and a financial expertise I couldn't match. He was counting on my being unprepared. That was his only real mistake. By the time soft Houston light started coming through the office blinds, I had a complete picture. I knew what we had, where it was, and what he had been planning to do with it. I went back to bed and lay there next to him for 2 more hours, memorizing the ceiling. Memorizing the specific quiet of a house I had run for 30 years. Making a decision. He got up at 6:30, showered, dressed, kissed my forehead. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Like always," I said. He left for his morning run. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, and then I picked up my phone. The first call I made was to a woman named Sandra Okafor. I knew about Sandra because 3 years earlier, my closest friend Patricia had gone through a divorce that should have destroyed her financially and didn't, because Sandra Okafor had handled it. Patricia had pressed Sandra's number into my hand at a dinner afterward and said, "Keep this. You'll probably never need it. Keep it anyway." I had kept it. I had never quite forgotten why. Sandra's office was in a glass building off Westheimer, on the 4th floor, overlooking a courtyard full of live oaks. She was 53, with natural gray locks and the kind of stillness that comes from having seen everything and choosing to be moved only by what actually warrants it. I sat across from her at 9:15 that morning, and I laid out everything: the phone screen, the emails, the financial documents, the consultation agreement with his attorney. She read through everything I'd printed. Her expression did not change. But something behind her eyes did. "Here's what you need to understand," she said, leaning forward. "Texas is a community property state. Everything accumulated during this marriage is presumed to belong equally to both of you. Your husband knows this. He works in finance. He understands the law better than most. Which means he's not planning to steal from you outright. He's planning to make things complicated enough and messy enough that you'll accept less than you're owed just to make it stop. We are not going to let him do that." She outlined what needed to happen. File first. File today, before he knew what was coming. Simultaneously request a temporary restraining order on all marital assets to prevent any transfers, liquidations, or disappearing acts. Move on the accounts before he could. And then, before you come back here this afternoon, you need to go to the bank. I went to the bank. Marcus and I had banked with the same institution for 26 years. The branch manager, a man named Gerald, had known us both by name for over a decade. He smiled when he saw me come through the door. I was wearing a blazer. I had slept maybe 45 minutes. I smiled back. "I need to discuss our joint accounts," I said. "There are some transfers I need to make." We had a checking account carrying roughly $60,000, a savings account with $180,000, a money market account with $340,000. Texas community property law gave me an equal claim to every dollar in every one of those accounts. I transferred exactly half of each into a new account solely in my name, at a different institution entirely. Gerald's smile had grown careful by the end of our meeting. Is everything all right, Mrs. Reeves? Everything is perfectly fine, I told him. Thank you for your help. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. Was that aggressive? Was that too much? And I want to answer that honestly. I was not stealing. I was not acting out of rage. I was taking legal possession of assets that were already legally mine. Before a man with a 12-month head start and a financial network I couldn't compete with could restructure things to my disadvantage. That is not aggression. That is self-preservation. And if you have ever been in a situation where you were scrambling to catch up to someone who had a plan for you that you didn't know about, you understand the difference. By 2 in the afternoon, I had repositioned $290,000 into accounts Marcus could not touch. I had copies of every financial document we owned. I had retained the finest divorce attorney in Houston, and Sandra's team was filing papers at the courthouse. I still had to go home. Marcus came in that evening at 8:45. There was a cologne I didn't recognize on him, or maybe I had recognized it for months and simply refused to name it. He sat down at the dinner table and ate the meal I'd kept warm for him, and scrolled through his phone with that small private smile I had been seeing for almost a year, without fully letting myself understand it. Diana, he said, not looking up. I want us to talk this weekend. About some things. About where we are. My heart didn't race. It slowed. I looked at his face, the face I had woken up next to for 31 years, and I understood that he had a script prepared. He had decided how this conversation would go, what terms he would present, how he expected me to respond. He had choreographed my devastation. He was planning to tell me this weekend, on his terms, in the order he had chosen. Of course, I said. We can talk this weekend. He looked relieved. Like a man who had been bracing for a harder conversation. Good. I think once we talk, you'll understand. It'll be better for both of us. I excused myself and went to the bedroom. I sent Sandra a message. He's planning to initiate this Saturday. Are we ready? Her response was immediate. Already filed. Process server goes to his office tomorrow at noon. I lay in the dark that night, for the last time in that marriage. Not sleeping. Thinking. I thought about our wedding day. How young we had both been. How genuine the love was at the beginning because it was genuine, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I thought about bringing Simone home from Texas Children's Hospital, how Marcus had cried in the car, how I had loved him so much in that moment. I thought about what it means to invest 3 decades of yourself into a person who eventually decides your value has depreciated, and I thought, I am 57 years old. Statistically, I have another 30 years. 30 years I will not spend being someone's abandoned draft. The process server reached Marcus's office at 12:17 the next afternoon. My phone rang at 12:22. I let it ring 4 times. What did you do? Not a question. His voice was something I had never heard before, stripped of the confidence, the practiced calm, the boardroom register. Just raw, exposed fury. I filed for divorce, Marcus. You took money. You froze the accounts. You had me served at my I took half, I said. My half. Which I was entitled to by law, and yes, I filed first. Because you had already consulted an attorney 11 days ago and hadn't told me, which means one of us was going to move first, and I decided it was going to be me. Silence. Long, extraordinary silence. Was Brianna standing nearby when it happened? I asked. When the papers were handed to you? He hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop, 3 blocks from the Meridian Capitol building, and I breathed. My hands were shaking, my eyes were burning, and I felt, and I know this sounds strange, grateful. Not happy. Not victorious. Just grateful that I had moved. That I had not waited for him to arrange my diminishment on his schedule. If you have ever finally done the thing you were terrified to do, and discovered that the terror was survivable, you know exactly what I mean. In the days that followed, Sandra's team kept finding things. A brokerage account I had never heard of, opened 2 years earlier, holding approximately $380,000 in systematically transferred funds, small amounts. Moved quietly, never large enough to trigger automatic alerts. Monthly payments of $1,800 to an address in Midtown Houston that turned out to be Brianna Voss's apartment. A personal loan Marcus had taken out 4 months earlier, $68,000, that had simply vanished from any account I could trace. Jewelry purchases at a boutique in Rice Village that had never arrived at our home. A leased Mercedes, registered to Brianna, with payments coming from a credit card in Marcus's name that I had never seen. The scale of it was staggering. Not the money itself, though the money was significant. What staggered me was the duration of it. The patience. This hadn't been a reckless affair that escalated into crisis. This had been a parallel life, methodically constructed over 2 years, while I made his dinner and managed his household, and told myself that the distance I felt between us was just the natural gravity of a long marriage. I almost didn't let myself be angry. That might sound strange, but I had spent so long moderating my own reactions, so long making space for his comfort over mine, that even now my first instinct was to manage what I felt. I had to consciously give myself permission to be furious. And when I did, when I actually sat with the full weight of what he had done, something clarified in me that had been murky for years. Sandra called me into her office on a Thursday. She set out financial documents, bank statements, receipts, a summary spreadsheet her forensic accountant had prepared. She walked me through the numbers quietly and professionally. Then she looked up. "He is going to propose a settlement. His attorney already called. They want to offer you 40%. 40%. In a community property state. For 31 years of marriage." I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the documents spread across her conference table. The hidden accounts. The apartment payments. The Mercedes. The jewelry that went to someone else. "Tell them no," I said. "Catherine. Sandra. Tell them no. I want 60% of all marital assets. I want full reimbursement of every dissipated dollar. I want him to cover legal fees. And if they don't agree, I want a trial date." Sandra held my gaze for a moment. Then she wrote something down. "All right," she said. The settlement meeting was 3 days later. Marcus sat across a conference table from me for the first time since I had last served him dinner. He looked at the table. He looked at his attorney, a man named Clifford Pruitt, who had the energy of someone used to winning on charm, and he looked at the wall. He did not look at me. "Sandra presented our position calmly and completely," Clifford argued. Sandra dismantled each argument with documents. I sat with my hands folded and said nothing and let her work. This was what I had paid for. This was the head start I had bought with 1 sleepless night and 2 steady hands. I watched Marcus's face during this meeting. And for just a moment, one moment, I saw something that surprised me. Not remorse exactly. Something more like vertigo. Like a man who had believed he understood how a story would end, and was now discovering he'd been reading the wrong book. Part of me ached at that. Part of me understood that he was not a monster. He was a man who had convinced himself that what he was doing was inevitable and that inevitability made it acceptable. That is not monstrous. It is simply a failure of moral imagination, so complete it becomes its own kind of cruelty. The meeting ended without resolution. Which was fine. Because 4 days later, something happened that neither Sandra nor I had planned. Simone called me from Austin. "Mom, I heard something from a friend who works in HR at a place that does business with Dad's firm. There was an investigation. Meridian Capital had a strict policy about supervisor-subordinate relationships. Marcus had never disclosed his relationship with Brianna. When someone at the firm, it was never confirmed who flagged it internally, the compliance office moved quickly. Marcus was placed on administrative leave within the week. Brianna was transferred to a different department and a different floor. And then, "Mom, did you know she was married?" I had not known. Brianna Voss had a husband named Derek, and Derek had found out about the affair approximately 3 days after Marcus was served, apparently via a screenshot that arrived anonymously in his direct messages. Derek had filed for divorce of his own. He had also, through his attorney, sent a letter to Marcus's personal email address that was not legally actionable but was by all accounts quite direct. 2 marriages, 1 relationship, both destroyed. Marcus's attorney came back to Sandra with a new number. 55. 45. In my favor, Sandra called me to relay it. "What do you want to do?" "I want 60-40. I want full reimbursement. I want him to pay every legal bill. And I'm prepared to sit in a courtroom and let a judge read every one of those emails out loud if that's what it takes." Clifford Pruitt called back the next morning. They accepted. The final hearing was on a Tuesday in November, at the Harris County Family Law Center. I wore a charcoal suit and my mother's gold earrings. I arrived 11 minutes early. Marcus arrived looking like a man who had aged considerably in 6 weeks, which, in fairness, he had. The presiding judge was a woman named Judge Carolyn Marsh, who had the demeanor of someone who had heard every version of this story and had very little patience for the ones involving hidden assets and funded mistresses. She reviewed the settlement terms aloud, methodically. 60% of all marital assets. 100% of the equity in the Memorial Area home, which I chose to keep. 60% of Marcus's retirement portfolio, approximately $1.3 million. Full reimbursement of all documented dissipation, the hidden accounts, the apartment, the car lease, the jewelry, the miscellaneous $467,000 total. All legal fees, both parties combined, to be paid by Marcus. She looked at him over her reading glasses. Mr. Reeves, do you understand and voluntarily agree to these terms? Yes, Your Honor. His voice was barely there. I want to say something for the record, Judge Marsh said, and the courtroom went very still. This court sees the concealment of marital assets and the use of community funds to support an extramarital relationship as a serious violation of the duty of good faith spouses owe each other. Mr. Reeves, you had a considerable financial advantage in this marriage, and you chose to weaponize it. The settlement before us today is proportionate. A trial would not have been more favorable to you. She brought the gavel down. 31 years. Ended with a sound like a single knock on a door. In the hallway afterward, Marcus found me before I reached the elevator. Diana. I stopped. He looked not sorry, exactly. Exhausted. She left me, he said. Brianna. The day the investigation started, she ended it. Just like that. I looked at him for a long moment. This man I had loved genuinely and completely, and for a very long time. Then you know exactly how it feels, I said, to be with someone who was calculating their exit the entire time. I stepped into the elevator. I did not look back. The house felt enormous for the first 2 weeks, and then it felt like mine. I repainted the front room a deep, warm terracotta. I turned Marcus's home office into something I'd been quietly wanting for years, a proper workspace, bright lighting, a long desk, room to think. I had my attorney's office on speed dial for the first month while the asset transfers processed, and then I didn't need it anymore. In January, I got a call from a woman named Denise Morales, who had been a colleague of mine 20 years ago at an energy consulting firm I'd left when Calvin was born. She was now a senior director at a Houston-based infrastructure advisory group. I've been hearing your name again, she said, which was one of the more unexpected sentences I'd heard in recent memory. We have a gap in senior financial strategy that I think you could walk into. I know it's been a while. I also know that what you did at Meridian back in 2001 built the framework we're still using today. She paused. I don't think dormant and gone mean the same thing. I started in February. 3 days a week to begin with. Then 4. The work came back faster than I expected, or maybe it had never actually left. Maybe it had just been waiting, the way certain things wait. I was earning more than I had at 30. I was also sleeping better than I had in years. Simone called every Sunday. Calvin came home for a long weekend in March and fixed things around the house that had needed fixing for years, and we ate barbecue on the back porch and talked until midnight. Both of them had tried, separately, to maintain a relationship with Marcus after the divorce. Both of them had discovered the same thing. A man who called wanting sympathy, who canceled plans, who was interested in their attention but not their lives. They made their own choices. I did not ask them to. In April, I heard through a mutual contact that Meridian Capital had not renewed Marcus's contract after the administrative leave concluded. The firm's official position was simply that his role was being restructured. His reputation in Houston's financial community, which had been considerable, was substantially diminished. I felt nothing particular when I heard this. Not satisfaction, not sorrow. Just the quiet understanding that actions tend to find their consequences, eventually, whether or not anyone is watching. In May, I had dinner with a man named Franklin, a structural engineer I'd met through a project at work. It was awkward in the particular way that first dates are awkward when you haven't been on one in over 3 decades, and I drove home afterward and laughed alone in my car for about 5 minutes. We had a second dinner 2 weeks later. I am not in a hurry. That is, in itself, something new, not needing to rush toward the next version of my life, trusting that it is already in progress. Here is what I want to leave you with. The text message that started all of this, "Your wife is holding you back," was designed to reduce me. It was designed to be the last word on who I was and what I was worth. And for about 45 seconds, standing in my kitchen in Houston, Texas, with a coffee mug in my hand, and 31 years of my life reorganizing itself into evidence, I let it. I felt it land. I felt what it was trying to do. And then I set down the coffee mug, and I began to plan. You are never too late. You are never too settled. You are never so deep inside a life that you cannot, with steady hands and the right people beside you, begin to reclaim it. The mistake most people make is waiting until they feel ready, waiting until the fear passes, until the timing improves, until they feel strong enough. The truth I learned on a kitchen floor in October is that the strength doesn't arrive before the decision. It arrives because of it. Ask yourself this. Is there somewhere in your life where you have been accommodating someone else's comfort at the cost of your own truth? Sit with that. You don't have to answer it today, but sit with it. If you are watching this and you see yourself in this story, not necessarily the divorce, but the slow erasure, the quietly diminished version of yourself that appeared over years without anyone noticing, I want you to know something. It is recoverable. All of it. I am 58 years old. I have my home, my children, my career, and the specific peace that comes from knowing that I did not wait to be discarded. I acted. And I am telling you, it is worth it. Comment below, 1, if you think I handled this the right way, 2, if you would have done something differently, 3, if this story hit somewhere close to home. I read every single one. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you have ever been where I was, standing in a kitchen, holding very still, feeling the world rearrange itself, I want to hear from you. You don't have to share the whole story. Just let me know you're out there. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe. I'm going to keep sharing stories like this. One stories about women who chose to stand up when it would have been easier to sit down. You deserve to see how it ends. And it does end well. It ends with you. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston, Texas to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.